Escalating global tensions. Trump's call for sanctions on China sparks retaliatory rhetoric from Beijing. In a bold move amid stalled peace efforts in Ukraine, U.S. President Donald Trump has urged European Union leaders to impose sanctions on China, accusing Beijing of funding Russia's ongoing war efforts through economic support. The call, made during a virtual meeting of the Coalition of the Willing on September 4, 2025, highlights growing frustrations in Washington over the protracted conflict and the roles of major global powers. However, China has fired back, calling on nations worldwide to sanction the United States for its financial and military backing of Israel's operations in Gaza and the broader Middle East. Trump's push for EU action against China. The virtual summit, hosted by French President Emmanuel Macron in Paris and attended by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, along with leaders from Germany, the United Kingdom, Italy, Japan, and others, focused on security guarantees for Ukraine in the event of a peace deal with Russia. Trump joined remotely and delivered a pointed message, emphasizing Europe's continued reliance on Russian energy and China's indirect role in sustaining Moscow's military campaign. According to a White House official, Trump stated that Europe must stop purchasing Russian oil that is funding the war, as Russia received $1.1 billion in fuel sales from the EU in 1 year. He further pressed European leaders to place economic pressure on China for funding Russia's war efforts. This marked a rare instance of the U.S. president outsourcing pressure tactics to allies, as Trump has so far avoided direct sanctions on Beijing, citing ongoing trade negotiations. Trump's frustration stems from the slow progress in ending the Ukraine war, now in its fourth year, since Russia's full-scale invasion in February 2022. Despite a high-profile summit between Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska last month, diplomatic momentum has stalled, with Putin ignoring deadlines for concessions. Zelensky echoed the sentiment post-meeting, stressing the need for intensified pressure on Russia and its trading partners, including secondary sanctions and special trade tariffs. Critics note that Europe's energy imports from Russia, though drastically reduced from pre-war levels, down to $172 billion in Q1 2025 from $16.4 billion in Q1 2021, still provide Moscow with vital revenue. Hungary and Slovakia have been highlighted as key buyers, prompting accusations of undermining Western sanctions. Trump has already imposed 50% tariffs on India for similar oil purchases, signaling his willingness to use economic tools aggressively. China's counterpunch, sanctions on the U.S. for Israel support. Beijing's response was swift and pointed, framing the U.S. as the aggressor in another flashpoint. The Israel-Hamas war. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Guo Jikun stated that countries on the other side of the world should impose sanctions on the U.S. for financing Israel's war effort in Gaza. This rhetoric aligns with China's long-standing criticism of U.S. support for Israel, which it views as enabling violations of international law and exacerbating humanitarian crises. China has repeatedly condemned Israel's actions in Gaza, where over 64,000 Palestinians have been killed since October 2023, according to health authorities, amid accusations of genocide. Beijing has called for an immediate ceasefire and the implementation of a two-state solution, while accusing Washington of vetoing UN Security Council resolutions and providing unconditional military aid to Israel. In recent months, China has positioned itself as a potential peace broker in the Middle East, similar to its mediation between Iran and Saudi Arabia in 2023, though its close ties to Tehran limit its neutrality. The call for global sanctions on the U.S. comes as tensions rise over Israel's recent strikes on Iranian targets, which China has labeled unacceptable violations of sovereignty. Foreign Minister Wang Yi urged countries with influence over Israel, a veiled reference to the U.S., to de-escalate, warning that Middle East instability threatens global peace. This mirrors China's broader strategy of anti-Western neutrality, portraying itself as a champion of the global South while avoiding direct confrontation. Broader implications for global alliances. This exchange risks fracturing alliances further. The EU, already strained by energy dependencies and internal divisions, e.g., Hungary's pro-Russia leanings, faces pressure to align with U.S. demands without alienating China, its largest trading partner. Implementing sanctions on Beijing could disrupt supply chains and escalate trade wars, especially as Trump pursues tariffs on multiple fronts. For China, the rhetoric serves domestic audiences and bolsters its image in the global South, where sympathy for Palestine runs high. However, experts doubt Beijing's call will gain traction, as few nations are willing to risk U.S. retaliation. Meanwhile, the U.S. has imposed sanctions on Palestinian human rights groups for seeking ICC probes into Israel, drawing accusations of double standards. As the Ukraine and Gaza conflicts drag on, this diplomatic volley illustrates a world increasingly divided along great power lines. Trump's approach, pressuring allies while holding back direct action, may yield short-term leverage, but risks isolating the U.S. if Europe balks. China, for its part, uses the moment to challenge American dominance, though its limited Middle East influence tempers its ambitions. With deadlines looming for new sanctions packages and ongoing military escalations, the coming weeks could test the fragility of global stability. As Zelensky noted, the key to peace is depriving war machines of money. Whether rhetoric translates to action remains to be seen.